Close your eyes for a second. Actually, don't. You need to read this, but imagine it. You're standing in a forest. No city sounds, no traffic hum, no refrigerator drone or notification ping. Nothing. Just the wind through leaves, the distant trickle of water, the occasional rustle of something small and probably harmless in the underbrush. It's almost peaceful. Then it happens. A sound tears through the darkness. Low, rolling, chest deep, so powerful you feel it vibrate through the soles of your feet before your ears even fully register it. Every hair on your body stands at attention. Your stomach drops. Your legs, without asking your brain for permission, begin backing away. Your heart rate doubles in under a second. You don't think. You don't reason. You just react. That sound was a lion's roar. And the reason your body responded before your conscious mind could even process what you were hearing, the reason your palms are sweating right now, just imagining it, is because that reaction was written into your nervous system over hundreds of thousands of years of survival. Your ancestors who didn't react fast enough to that sound are not your ancestors at all. They became lunch. The ones who survived passed down a biological alarm system so deeply embedded in human neurological architecture that it still fires perfectly today, even if the last lion you encountered was on the other side of thick enclosure glass while eating an overpriced zoo pretzel. But here's where this gets genuinely interesting. The lion's roar isn't the only sound that did this to ancient humans. There is an entire catalog of sounds, some natural, some atmospheric, some biological, that triggered ancient human fear responses so profound they didn't just shape individual survival. They shaped culture, religion, architecture, language, art. Some of these sounds are still embedded in our nightmares, our mythology, our horror films, and our deepest architectural instincts. And most of us have no idea why. So let's go through them, all of them, and find out exactly what sounds kept our ancestors awake, shaking, praying, and occasionally running very fast in the opposite direction, starting with thunder. Not because it's the most dangerous sound on this list, but because the psychological relationship between ancient humans and thunder is one of the most consequential in the entire history of civilization. Thunder is, physically, a shockwave. Lightning superheats the surrounding air to roughly 5 times the temperature of the surface of the sun, briefly, explosively. And the rapid expansion of that air creates a sonic boom that can travel for miles. In open terrain, with no modern buildings to muffle it, a close thunderclap is somewhere between 120 and 130 decibels. For reference, a jet engine at close range is around 140. Thunder, experienced in the open, without walls, without understanding, is physically assaulting. Ancient humans had no framework for understanding what thunder was. No meteorology, no atmospheric science, no comforting news anchor explaining that this low-pressure system moving in from the coast is expected to bring isolated showers through Thursday. There was just a sound from the sky, louder than anything a living creature could produce, accompanied by a flash of light that could instantly kill trees, animals, and people. If you heard that and didn't develop an immediate, overwhelming fear response, something was wrong with you. But ancient humans didn't just fear thunder. They theologized it. Almost every major ancient culture independently arrived at the same conclusion, that thunder was the voice or weapon of a supreme deity. Zeus hurling thunderbolts, Thor swinging Mjolnir, Indra wielding the Vajra, Tyrannus among the Celts, Perun in Slavic tradition, Tlaloc in Mesoamerica, the Yoruba thunder deity, Shango. The pattern is so consistent across cultures with no contact with each other that it represents one of the most compelling examples of parallel religious development in human history. The sound was so overwhelming, so beyond anything else in the natural world, that the only logical explanation available to the ancient mind was divine intention. Something immensely powerful, something larger than nature itself, was speaking, or attacking, or expressing displeasure. Either way, the appropriate response was to get low, get quiet, and start thinking about what you might have done wrong recently. Thunder didn't just make ancient humans afraid, it gave them gods. Now consider a sound much closer to the ground, the infrasound of large predators. Here's something that doesn't come up enough in conversations about ancient fear. Big cats, particularly tigers and lions, don't just roar at frequencies humans can hear. They also produce infrasound, sound waves below 20 hertz, beneath the threshold of human hearing. You cannot consciously hear infrasound, but your body detects it. Research on this phenomenon has produced findings that genuinely rewire how you think about human fear responses. Infrasound at certain frequencies causes disorientation, feelings of unease, sudden anxiety, and in stronger doses, visual disturbances and what subjects describe as a sense of presence. A feeling that something is watching, something is near, something is wrong, and you don't know why. Tigers, when vocalizing at full volume, produce infrasound in the 18 Hz range. Lions produce similar low-frequency components. These frequencies propagate through the ground, through walls, through your body. Your vestibular system and your autonomic nervous system pick them up without your conscious awareness, and they trigger exactly the kind of diffuse, sourceless dread that ancient humans would have found deeply destabilizing. Because you couldn't identify the threat. You couldn't point to it. You just knew, at a level below thought, that something enormous and dangerous was nearby. This may explain certain aspects of ancient human behavior that archaeologists find puzzling. Camps abandoned suddenly, fire circles left incomplete, people clustering at the centers of shelters rather than at the edges. The felt sense of a large predator's presence, mediated through infrasound, could produce behavioral responses in ancient humans without those humans ever consciously hearing a sound. The fear wasn't irrational. The trigger was just invisible, a vibration in the air and earth that bypassed rational processing entirely and went straight to the ancient brainstem that was already running the calculations. Run, hide, cluster together. Do not be the one standing alone in the dark. Volcanoes. The sound of a volcano experienced up close is one of the most extreme acoustic events the natural world can produce. And ancient humans in certain parts of the world had to live near them. Mount Vesuvius, Santorini, the volcanoes of Central America, the calderas of the Pacific Ring of Fire, the East African Rift. These geological features were not abstract threats. They were present, active elements of the landscape that ancient populations built their lives around. Because volcanic soil is extraordinarily fertile, and ancient farmers made reasonable risk calculations that occasionally turned catastrophic. The sounds of a volcanic event escalate in stages. First come deep harmonic tremors, low, rhythmic, felt more than heard, caused by magma moving through underground channels. Then come explosions from gas venting. Then, if it goes all the way, a full eruption produces what volcanologists call an acoustic event, a blast wave that can circle the Earth multiple times, detectable on instruments thousands of miles away, and audible as a distinct boom at distances of several hundred miles. The 1883 eruption of Krakatoa, not ancient but instructive, produced a sound heard clearly in Australia, 4,000 kilometers away. Rodriguez Island, nearly 5,000 kilometers distant, reported the sound as distant cannon fire. People who had no concept of what had happened, who lived far beyond any possibility of seeing the eruption, heard a sound from nowhere and had no framework whatsoever for explaining it. For ancient humans living near active volcanic regions, the low harmonic tremors were experienced as the Earth itself groaning. The ground, the solid, dependable ground that everything rested upon, was making sounds. It was expressing something. And because ancient humans interpreted the natural world as animated by intention, because the thunder had a god behind it and the river had a spirit, a groaning mountain absolutely had something behind it too. Something vast, something displeased. By the way, if you want to go even deeper into the secret lives of ancient humans, I just launched a full course called The Secret Lives of Ancient Humans. 10 modules, 3+ hours of content covering everything we never talk about on YouTube. What they feared, how they communicated, what hunted them, and much more. Plus an exclusive PDF guide included. Link in the description. See you inside. Volcanic sounds didn't just frighten ancient humans. They produced religions, ritual sacrifices, and entire mythological systems built around appeasing whatever enormous entity was evidently living under the mountain and making its dissatisfaction audible. The sound of silence at the wrong moment. This one requires some explanation because it seems counterintuitive. Sound is alarming, yes, but ancient humans who spent their lives in natural environments developed extraordinarily sensitive awareness of what those environments were supposed to sound like. A forest at night has a baseline. Insects, frogs, small animals moving, wind, water. A savanna has its own acoustic signature. A coastline has another. When that baseline disappears, when the birds stop and the insects go quiet, and the frogs cease their chorus, what you are hearing is an absence. And that absence is one of the most potent danger signals the natural world produces. Predators moving into an area suppress ambient sound. Large, dangerous animals cause smaller animals to freeze, hide, go silent. The acoustic environment of a forest detects threats before individual organisms can see them and broadcasts a collective warning. Something wrong is moving through here. Everything that can hide is hiding. Ancient humans learned to read this silence the way modern people read warning lights on a dashboard. A sudden drop in ambient sound meant something large was nearby, something that made other things go quiet. And because the silence was sourceless, you couldn't see the threat, you could only perceive its acoustic shadow. It produced an especially potent fear response. Your threat detection system was firing at maximum without giving you a target. Horror film composers have known this for decades. The silence before the jump scare. The quieting of background music before something terrible appears on screen. The effective use of sudden acoustic absence to create dread is not a modern invention. It is a conscious exploitation of an ancient survival reflex that hasn't gone anywhere. The birds went quiet. Your ancestors froze. And the ones who didn't, once again, are not your ancestors, human screaming, specifically screaming in distress. This is one of the most studied sounds in human psychoacoustics, and the findings are remarkable. Human screams of genuine distress have a particular acoustic quality, a roughness, a harshness, a kind of raggedness in the sound that researchers call roughness, and that falls in a frequency range between approximately 40 and 150 Hz modulation rate. This acoustic texture is processed by the amygdala, the brain's alarm center, differently from other sounds, more directly, more urgently, with a faster bypass of the usual cortical processing that lets you think about what you're hearing before reacting. A scream from a member of your group hearing something you cannot yet see is a threat multiplier. It tells you the threat is real. It tells you it is close. It tells you it was unexpected enough to cause an uncontrolled vocal response. It tells you someone who was probably just fine moments ago is now not fine at all. Ancient humans living in tight social groups would have experienced distress screams as among the most alarming sounds in their acoustic environment. Not because the sound itself was dangerous, but because of what it meant. A screaming group member meant something had found them. Something fast enough or quiet enough to reach one of them before alarm could be raised. Something that prompted an involuntary vocal response rather than immediate flight. The processing of screams in the human brain is so hardwired that it affects us even from strangers, even from recordings, even from fictional film depictions of people we know are actors on a soundstage. Your amygdala does not fully distinguish. It hears the acoustic texture of genuine distress and it responds. Every horror film, every thriller, every emergency siren uses a variation of these same acoustic frequencies because the fear response they trigger is automatic and essentially inescapable. Ancient humans didn't need to know why screams frightened them. They just knew. Their nervous systems had been tuned over countless generations to treat that sound as an emergency override, moving into something a little less biological and a lot more atmospheric. The sound of a sudden, violent storm. Not just thunder, the full package, the roar of wind escalating from calm to chaotic, the drumming of heavy rain, the crack and groan of trees in high wind, the hiss of hail. The way sound itself seems to distort during the approach of a violent atmospheric event, the Doppler shift of distant thunder getting closer, the particular acoustic weirdness of a tornado's signature, which survivors often describe as sounding like a freight train even if they've never been near a freight train. Ancient humans with no permanent shelter, or primitive shelters that provided minimal protection, experienced severe weather as an existential threat rather than an inconvenience. A storm strong enough to fell trees could kill people in the open. Flash floods in canyon country, common in certain regions, could eliminate entire groups without warning. The acoustic precursors of these events were worth tracking obsessively. What makes storm sounds psychologically distinctive is their combination of randomness and escalation. The wind builds, the sound intensifies, but it's chaotic, unpredictable. It doesn't have the rhythmic regularity of something biological, so threat processing systems can't easily categorize or habituate to it. You can't tell if it's getting worse. You can't tell when it will stop. You can't tell how bad it's going to get. And uncertainty, for a nervous system wired to assess threat, is almost more distressing than certainty of danger. The mythological residue of storm fear in ancient cultures is enormous. Rain deities, storm gods, wind spirits, virtually every ancient religious tradition has them because virtually every ancient culture had reason to treat severe atmospheric events as something more than weather, something intentional, something directed, something that might be reasoned with, appeased, predicted through ritual. Ancient meteorology was theology. Because when you don't understand what's happening in the sky, and the sky is making sounds like that, prayer is a reasonable emergency response. Earthquakes produce a sound before they produce shaking. This is not widely known, and it's worth sitting with for a moment. Before the ground moves, before walls crack and shelves fall, there is a sound. A low, deep, resonant rumble. Sometimes compared to distant thunder, sometimes to a large vehicle approaching underground. This sound travels ahead of the seismic wave because sound moves faster than the ground displacement itself. Animals detect it. Dogs, cattle, birds, and certain other creatures respond to this precursor sound before human instruments register the coming quake. Ancient humans in seismically active regions, and large portions of the ancient world's most populated areas were exactly that, given the coincidence of fertile valleys and tectonic fault lines, would have experienced this precursor sound as a warning with no visible source. A sound from underground. A rumble from the earth itself. And then the shaking would arrive. The dread this produced in ancient populations was not merely about physical danger, significant as that was. It was metaphysical. The earth, the ground beneath your feet, the most fundamental assumption of physical stability in the universe, was not reliable. It could move. It could open. It could shake the structures you built, and it made a sound when it was about to do so, a sound that was not a crack of lightning or a roar of wind, but a voice from somewhere deep below, from somewhere you could not see or reach or understand. Ancient cultures in earthquake-prone regions often developed mythologies featuring underground beings, chthonic deities, or world animals whose movement caused the earth to shudder. The Japanese Namazu, a giant catfish restrained underground whose struggles caused earthquakes. The Greek myth of giants buried beneath volcanoes. The Norse concept of Jörmungandr, the world's serpent whose eventual motion would signal catastrophe. These are not arbitrary inventions, they are attempts to explain something that felt, experientially, like a creature moving beneath the world. Something enormous. Something below. Something that made noise when it stirred. The sound of an approaching earthquake was the sound of something waking up underground. Ancient humans had absolutely no framework for a benign interpretation of that experience. A sound that often gets overlooked in these conversations. The breathing of something large in the dark. Not roaring, not growling, just breathing. Slow. Close. Regular. Coming from somewhere in the darkness just beyond the firelight. This requires understanding ancient campfire culture. The fire was the boundary. Inside the light, you were reasonably safe. Fire kept most predators at a distance, most of the time. But beyond the light was a circle of complete unknown. Ancient humans who camped in the open, in forest clearings, on the edges of savannas, had to spend their nights trusting that the firelight was enough. Often it was, sometimes it wasn't. Hearing something breathe in the darkness beyond the fire was a very particular kind of terror. Not the explosive, reactive terror of a sudden roar or a scream. A slow, cold, creeping terror. Because the breathing said, it's already there. It's been there. It knows where you are. It's been watching. And it's patient. Large predators, big cats especially, are capable of extraordinary patience and silence. A lion observing a camp might stay perfectly still and nearly silent for extended periods, breathing slowly, watching, waiting. Ancient humans who heard that breathing, who could not see what was breathing, who could only hear it, and know it was close and large and still, experienced one of the most sophisticated horror scenarios the natural world could construct. That specific dread, something in the dark, already close, already watching, patient and invisible, appears throughout ancient mythology, across essentially every culture, as a version of the nocturnal monster, the thing that comes when the fire dies, the thing beyond the light, the creature of darkness that doesn't announce itself until it's already upon you. Every monster story ever told around a fire is, at its root, about that breathing in the dark. And finally, because this list has to end somewhere, though human acoustic terror could fill several more volumes, the sound of absolute abnormal quiet from within your own group. Silence from nature is a warning signal, but silence from your own people, the people who should be talking, moving, breathing around you, is something worse. The sudden hush of a group that was just speaking, the collective stillness of people who all heard something at once and are now processing whether to run or freeze. The specific acoustic texture of shared human fear, the absence of normal social sound, the shallow breathing, the complete cessation of movement communicates danger with extraordinary efficiency. Ancient humans were intensely social. Their survival depended on the group. The group's collective attention was a threat detection system more powerful than any individual's senses. 20 pairs of ears, 20 pairs of eyes, 20 noses pointed in 20 directions, all processing information and contributing to collective safety. When that entire system went suddenly, completely quiet, when 20 people all stopped simultaneously, it meant the collective processing had reached a conclusion. Something is here, it is dangerous, and we are not yet sure what to do about it. The sound of your group going silent was the sound of the threat being real enough to silence 20 people at once. It was the alarm going off inside the alarm system. And for a creature wired to prioritize social information as much as ancient humans were, there was almost nothing more frightening. Here's what all of these sounds have in common, and it's something worth carrying out of this video and into your life. Every single one of them bypasses conscious processing. They don't arrive as information to be analyzed. They arrive as commands issued directly to the nervous system. Run, freeze, cluster, hide, alert. Every one of them evolved over vast stretches of time, not to be understood, but to be obeyed. And they still work on you right now. The horror genre's entire existence is a testament to how completely intact these ancient auditory fear responses remain in the modern human nervous system. Filmmakers and sound designers don't create new fears. They catalog old ones. The thunderclap on a horror soundtrack. The sudden silence before the monster appears. The scream from somewhere you can't see. The low, rumbling infrasound pushed through subwoofers in theaters. A technique some sound designers use deliberately because they know it produces unease in the audience at a level below conscious awareness. You are not watching horror films. You are briefly returning to the ancestral darkness, where these sounds meant something immediate and mortal and real. The ancient humans who survived Every single one of your ancestors across an unbroken chain stretching back, hundreds of thousands of years, survived because their bodies answered these sounds correctly. Fast enough, consistently enough, with sufficient urgency. They clustered toward fire and toward each other. They went silent and still. They ran when running was the answer, and froze when stillness was better. And their reward for being correctly afraid at the right moment is that they lived long enough to have children who did the same thing. You are the descendant of every person who heard something terrifying in the dark and reacted correctly. Your fear response is not a weakness or an irrationality or a glitch in your otherwise sophisticated modern psychology. It is a trophy case, a collection of the correct answers to the hardest questions the ancient world ever asked. Next time something makes the hair rise on the back of your neck, next time a sound catches you wrong, makes your stomach drop, makes your legs want to move before your brain has decided anything, take a moment to appreciate what's happening. Hundreds of thousands of years of correctly answered survival tests encoded in your nervous system, still running perfectly. Your ancestors would be proud, and mildly surprised you survived this long without needing any of it.